failure is seen as a terminal thing, because actually there's a lot of very jealous and incapable, and I say incapable people out there that love to see people fail. We hired the wrong people at first and spent £1 million that we then ripped up and had to start again. I've been speaking to, Foxtons and LSL and actually Michael Bruce at Purple Bricks, One Dome, a whole bunch of other people that I've never mentioned before, by the way, Johnny. You're getting all this exclusively. This is another exclusive, by the way, Johnny. There's loads of stuff in it, I've never told anybody this, by the way. I don't know if I should tell you this. If I was under an NDA, it's definitely expired now. Here's another exclusive. This is about exclusive number 6, Johnny. Well, whose fault's that? Stop bloody moaning about it and do something about it.
So, hello and welcome to the After Hours Property Podcast. We are very lucky to have this man sat in front of us today. He doesn't need any sort of introduction, but he is Russell Quirk. And Russell, I actually wants to ask you, how would you introduce yourself?
Oh God, how would I introduce myself? How would other people like me to be introduced? It's probably rampant failure. Russell Quirk has the audacity to appear on yet another podcast. There you go.
Or I should have introduced you as the 6th most influential person in the property market.
Yeah, almost in the top 5 of the most influential people in the property industry. Thanks for that, Johnny. And I know you hosted it. It wasn't your poll. It was Simon Bradbury's. No, I was flattered to be number 6. That's awesome. As far as I'm concerned, that's great.
So how would you introduce yourself then?
Myself, I guess I'm a veteran of the property sector, and I've done lots of things. I headed traditional estate agencies, online agencies. I've been a councillor, chairman of the planning committee. I've done kind of all sorts of public sector stuff in property. I've just kind of been around the block a bit. I like writing about property. Not everybody likes me writing about property, but I like writing about property and kind of being a bit edgy here and there.
Yeah.
Look, I'm from a property family. My dad, my grandfather, they were both estate agents. My cousins are estate agents. So look, it's embedded really.
Yeah. So I think that'd be quite a good place to start, Russell, because anyone in property I can imagine knows the name. For one reason or another, a lot of it's obviously come from eMoov. What you grew there, that monster of a company, and obviously you're quite opinionated over social media and other platforms as well. But it seems as though your whole family are quite entrepreneurial. So I wanted to sort of kick it back to how things all started, what you were like when you were younger. We were just talking just now how you used to sell cars. How did this all come about? Where did it start?
So the family are a family of estate agents. So my grandfather back in the 40s was a surveyor for the Cooperative Society in London. He then took the very brave decision in the 50s that he would go out on his own. So he started with a partner, an estate agency business. In Loughton was the first office. And then over the next decade or two, built that business up and included my dad and my 2 uncles in it. And it became a business called Quirk and Partners that had about 14 offices across Essex.
Yeah.
So as I grew up, I was kind of indoctrinated into that family business, and board meetings used to be my dad, my 2 uncles and my grandfather sitting around the breakfast table. And this is going to sound very misogynistic, but bear in mind, this is the 70s, right?
So sounds like something from The Godfather.
Well, it was that, but my grandmother literally surfing the table, serving breakfast to these guys. And they would talk about the business. They do that every day. So that was their kind of their daily meeting. And they get in their respective kind of, Rovers, Rolls Royces or whatever they had, depending on how the market was doing, and go off to their respective offices and run the business. And of course, being kids, being around that, literally from the age of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 upwards, it genuinely kind of rubs off. I mean, it wasn't just that my family were estate agents. They were all very close-knit. In fact, we had in Billericay, in a place called Norsey Road, and for those of you that are listening to this that know Billericay, you'll know Norsey Road. It's a fairly prestigious road. Yeah. And back in the 70s, we owned 3 houses next to each other. So my grandparents had the house in the middle with loads of land either side of it, and my grandfather gifted the right-hand side to my dad and the left-hand side to Anthony's dad, so Anthony being my partner in Quirk and now in Keller Williams. And so we had 3 fairly big houses, and they were all linked by a big driveway. So the kids used to spend their day kind of, on their bikes and go-karts around the driveways.
Yeah.
So it was very close-knit, and all we really talked about was property. And I'm not the only one. My other cousin Simon, Anthony, my sister Joanne, we've all respectively gone into estate agency. When I first went into the business in 1984, when I left school, my dad was just getting to the end of his tether with it, because by then my grandfather had died. The other 2 brothers didn't want to do it anymore. So my dad had, I think, 2 or 3 offices left, sold them whilst I was actually still part of that business, and went into cars. So that's why I followed him into the motor trade about a year later. He was selling Mazdas. He was known as Mazda Man in Essex, so out of Chelmsford, and what was Wesley Motors in Southend as well before that. And so I got a bug for cars, I suppose. But then one thing led to another, and I ended up going off and doing my own thing. Then I ended up at a place called Lancaster's, which is still in Colchester, in the same place, which was then Porsche Ferrari. It's now Porsche Ferrari, Maserati, and Bentley, I think.
Yeah.
So I had 10 years in cars. I then sold a Ferrari to a guy in the city who mesmerized me, frankly. And, he had all this money and all this kind of the trappings of this exciting life. So I thought, I used to, when he'd ordered his Ferrari F355, this is 1994, by the way, and I'd ring him up every now and again to kind of talk about delivery or whatever it might be. There's all this stuff going on in the background, numbers being shouted and screamed at each other. And he was obviously earning a few quid. And I happened to say to him when he picks up the car, I'd love to do what you do. And he just looked at me and went, yeah, all right then.
Really?
Went, what do you mean? Yeah, he said, yeah, no, I think you could do it. He said, come up for an interview. So I had to meet this guy called, this was quite a few years ago. It's 26 years ago.
I was going to say that car's a classic now.
Yeah, he said, come up and meet. Yeah, it is. They're worth now, 355 Ferraris worth the same now as they were when they were new, about 80 grand. Anyway, that's an aside. Beautiful things. So my interview was going up to meet a guy called Hutch, who just so happened to look like David Soul from Starsky and Hutch, something you probably won't remember. And anyway, so I had a 5-minute interview with that guy, but my real interview was then going to the Pont de la Tour with this guy and one of his bank clients, and getting really pissed and seeing basically when I kind of broke in half. And I think by about 5 or 6 o'clock, I was still standing. That was that. Next, I got a phone call saying, yeah, you passed, start Monday. So I left Lancaster's, went to the city for a couple of years, trading what was dollar mark at the time. It was horrible. Horrendous.
I didn't know that you did that.
Yeah. And it was a great, although it was horrible, because being a dollar mark, a foreign exchange broker, back then, it was just shouting out 2 sides of a price and waiting for someone to go, yeah, I'll have them, or yeah, I'll sell them. And it was very monotonous, actually.
Yeah.
But it taught me a lot about markets, and it got me introduced to a lot of really interesting people. So I then went back to cars. I went to Lancaster's in London to sell Porsches, where I kind of really honed my competitiveness, because I was up against 2 of the best Porsche salesmen in the world, guys called Steve Jackson and David Halls. I still remember them very fondly. And my ambition back then was to beat them and to become the #1 salesman of specialist cars in Lancaster's. And by 1998, I achieved that. So selling and making more profit at Porsches than anybody else in the group.
Wow.
And then this is quite a long anecdote. Sorry.
So nice, good. How old were you at this point? Just so I can sort of catch up with.
What was I? 28, 29, maybe 30 at the time.
Right. Okay.
And back in the day, the motor trade used to be really good then, because you get a really small, a bit like estate agency is, you get a really small basic, like 10 grand. But 25 years ago almost, you could earn 60 grand a year selling cars. And that was a lot of money then. It's a lot of money now.
Yeah.
I mean, real hard graft. You'd be, at your desk in London at 8:30, and you'd still be there at 7, 8 o'clock. You'd be working, a lot of the weekend. But it was fascinating. Really, really, really interesting. I delivered a car to the set of EastEnders once, because Sid Owen used to play Ricky. Again, you won't remember, Johnny. Some people watching this might.
No idea.
So I delivered his 911 to the back set of EastEnders, and out comes Bianca and Ross Kemp back in the day and all that. So yeah, no, I sold cars to the kind of the rich and famous, but particularly lots of city boys that I'd also kind of worked with back in the day, and that relationship building, or the ability to build relationships and talk to them about their thing on their level, was really important. So I did very well then, until one day my dad rang me end of the 1990s, actually 1999, and said, bear in mind we'd been out of estate agency for a time then. He said a guy called Neville Deakin, who owned a business called Green Deakin in Billericay, was about to retire and wanted to sell. And my dad said that he didn't have all the money. Did I want to come in? I said yes. So we bought that business for 30 grand, believe it or not, in 1999. Put half the money in, borrowed half of it, and refurbed the office and kind of went for it. And then about a year later, I realised there wasn't enough room in the business for my dad and I to both earn good money. I'd stayed on at Lancashire for a period of time. And my plan then was that if we were to expand, I'd need to bring somebody else in. So we brought in Anthony, my cousin, who was kind of, we were always were and have been and always will be close. And we then managed, because of Anthony's involvement, then to open our next office, which was in Canvey Island, which we opened and kind of cleaned up, really. We cleaned up a market share of Canvey Island very quickly. And then we opened a whole bunch of other offices. That business was called Quirk Deakin. And that took me up until about 2008, 2009, when I exited, sold my part of the business to somebody else. Yeah. And then I did eMoov, which of course some people will be familiar with as one of the first online estate agents.
Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like your past, you've touched on so many points there, which has then, I guess, helped in with eMoov and what it became. So your short time at the foreign exchange, obviously dealing with markets, I guess that become a large part to play in eMoov in the later years. Obviously estate agency and selling cars, you're just it sounds like you're a natural salesman. So obviously 2008 when you left that company, was there any online agents at the time? I know that House Network were, I guess, first considered.
House Network were number one, so they launched in 2004. So they and genuinely by 2006, 2007, when I was starting to think about online estate agency, I did not know they existed. I thought I was going to be the first. And it was only as I really kind of pursued a business that was going to be called futureagent.com. Until I came up with the name eMoov that was spelled wrong, as everybody that criticised me remind me of constantly. It was only then that I found that House Network had kind of launched and predated us by 3 or 4 years. But we were still, I think Hatched existed. That's right, Adam Day's Hatched existed. But we were very, very new, very embryonic. And look, herein lies the thing. This is, if you want to dig into my kind of head and why I am what I am and how I am, I realised then that with no budget, no money, I had a website and a dream, I suppose, that I had to become noticed. And my way of doing that was to start to be very vocal, very opinionated, very passionate, as I genuinely was, about the online model, and to shout it very loudly. So I did that within the trade. That then morphed into being noticed by consumer journalists. And roll forward to 2018. By that time, I'd hired James Lockett, who's my partner, my business partner and co-founder in Propaganda, who's just an utter legend. Although he's only a little bit older than you know him obviously. And by 2018, eMoov was getting 2,000 pieces of press coverage a year. So we were getting 150, 160 pieces a month. It was absolutely astonishing, and that was brand mentions around data pieces that we would put together, market commentary, all sorts of stuff, and we were really punching. We were, certainly back in 2015, 16, we were a business maybe listing a couple of hundred properties a month, but we had a voice that was as loud as Foxton's, Knight Frank and Savills, and that PR, which is why I'm now doing it for Propaganda, because it was a natural move, I suppose. That voice really helped customer acquisition, investor credibility, etc., etc. So that's kind of where I've really cut my teeth.
Yeah. And I get, so 2000, for those people that, well, you probably wouldn't know, I joined eMoov in 2000. I think I joined in 2014, and I was only maybe 18 years old at the time. And I can remember coming for my interview and walking into your office, and I remember seeing you in the corner. I think I just got one look up, and then that was it. I didn't say hello.
No, you're lucky I even looked at you.
I got one look, and then I just sort of put my head down. But
it was interviewed you.
Sorry?
Somebody else was interviewing you, not me.
Paula was, yeah. But at that time, it was a relatively large a company at the time. And this is what I say to everyone, obviously you've seen what's happened in eMoov and what's gone on and everything. And you do get some naysayers, but when I had, from being in that position, seeing you do what you do, seeing you grow the company and where it got to, I've got nothing but admiration for you because of, what you went through and what you had to do to get there. Now I did leave in 2016. So anything after that was, I didn't see anything going on, but I'd always say that, it was for me as a young person coming into my first job, it was such a great place to start my career because of what I saw you do and how you worked within the team. I remember one of the main things you gave, do you remember giving the book out, Zappos?
Yeah, I do.
Everyone?
Yeah. I bought 30 of them. I think at that time we had about 30 staff. I bought one for every member of staff because it was that book, The Journey of Zappos, who, for those that don't know, is it's a oh, my dog's just walked in. It's a shoe e-commerce website in the US, but their approach to customer service is absolutely astonishingly good. And I wanted that to replicate within the eMoov business, and that's why I was trying to articulate to everybody within the company, this is how we need to be. So yeah, and I remember that. And I was pretty hands-on. I think even as we got bigger, we got to 140 staff just after the Tepelo merger. So I think we were about 90 before that, just as eMoov, 140 when we did the Tepelo merger, which was summer 2018.
Yeah.
We were doing about 8 million in revenue. And I started the thing in my lounge. It was a laptop, a phone, and a lounge in 2009. And so look, it failed for all sorts of reasons. And I was the head of that business, so I have to take ultimate responsibility for that. But we did a lot of stuff. We built some amazing technology that, honestly, if that tech was now being used as CRM against the likes of Repit and Desres, it puts them in the shadow from a technical spec and a user experience point of view. Yeah. We employed lots of people. We were listing 1,000 properties a month before the end. So it was not a bad business in many respects. Yeah. Even though it didn't last. But look, I know people want to define me by that failure. Some of my, as you call them, naysayers, some of the curtain twitchers on property industry, on estate agent today, and I feel I feel a bit sorry for them, really. That's how they see life. That you believe that failure has to be terminal. It's like if you buy a lottery ticket, you don't win week one, do you never buy another one? If you have a relationship and you break up, do you never have another relationship? If you get a puncture in your car and you have to pull over to the side of the road and change it, do you jettison your car never to get in it again? And of course you don't. Failure is seen as a terminal thing because actually there's a lot of very jealous and incapable, and I say incapable people out there that love to see people fail in Britain. It's very different in other markets, but they love to see other people fail because it makes them feel so good about their own inadequacies.
About themselves, yeah. Yeah, and you must have taken on a lot as well, a lot of criticism, even before, it failed. I know that because you obviously had all that information and you was always out there, you was always going to get criticism. So it was almost self-inflicted, but you never seemed to take it too personally. I don't know, did you?
No, not really. It's just, there's a thing that I think is true, that most of the people that criticize me know what they think is my persona. So even now, look, I write a column for Property Industry Eye. Some people say it's controversial and punchy. I just think it's honest. I just think it's opinion. And I'm probably saying a lot of the time, like the one I wrote this week about booming, I've had dozens of people contact me that I know that have said, yeah, what you wrote was basically what I was thinking. So I'm not being, I'm not killing puppies, am I? I'm not, not burning people's houses down. I'm trying to court debate and discussion because I think it's healthy and because it might improve the industry. Yeah. If there are certain people that don't get that and they want to criticize and so on, then that's kind of up to them. It doesn't bother me. And so, but the thing is, apparently, what I hear is true, is that those people that see the persona have never met me, probably think I'm a dick. That's kind of fine. Not everybody, but most people have actually met me and see that I'm far more tongue-in-cheek than anybody realises. Much more sarcastic and dry than people perhaps give me credit for. Most people that have met me will say, actually, do you know what? He's right. And that seems to be the theme. But Johnny, whatever.
It's not gonna change your mind, is it?